In this video, I want to do a high-speed brain dump about FileMaker Go. Now, in other videos, we talk about specific new features that you should know about that are specific to a particular release. This is a more general video. This video is for people who have experience with FileMaker Pro, Mac, and Windows, but they don't have a lot of experience deploying to mobile devices, specifically FileMaker Go on the iPhone or iPad. So we're going to bring you up to date with all the general concerns, the things that you need to know about regarding FileMaker Go, because there are some general things that you have to keep in mind. So first off, it's important to understand that FileMaker Go is a completely free app that you can install on your iOS device. So you can go to Apple's App Store on the iPhone or iPad, and you can find a version of FileMaker Go that's compatible with your mobile device. And of course, this brings up an important point, and that is that Claris only supports certain versions of operating systems with FileMaker Go. So with the latest release, you have to use the minimum version of the operating system. So if you have an iPhone or iPad that runs at least this latest operating system, you're in great shape. Now keep in mind, if you have an older iOS device, well, frequently you can still go to Apple's App Store and find a compatible version of FileMaker Go that you can install on this device. Once again, this is totally free. Also keep in mind that older versions of FileMaker Go will be removed from the Apple App Store. So say, for example, I wanted to go back and find a copy of FileMaker Go 12 for a particularly old iPad. Well, if I had already installed FileMaker Go through my App Store account, then FileMaker Go is still on the App Store and I could still download it to my compatible device, even if I had previously deleted it by accident. So just keep in mind that once you download an app, Apple keeps track of that and they try to preserve your ability to go back and re-download that app, even if it's been discontinued by Claris. Now, something else to keep in mind about the FileMaker platform. People tend to mix different versions of FileMaker Pro, FileMaker Cloud, FileMaker Server, FileMaker Go. And of course, in an ideal world, you would keep all these versions perfectly synchronized. However, your server can generally get out of sync by one version with the clients you're using. Now, with FileMaker Cloud, that's a little trickier, and I'm not going to really spend too much time covering that here. We talk more about that in our FileMaker Deploy course, which is a separate course that you may or may not have access to. But as a general rule, you can mix software that's one version ahead or behind, which also brings up an important point. If you have an old Mac, for example, or an old Windows computer, and you have an old version of FileMaker Pro on it, someday you may not be able to connect to a newer version of FileMaker Server, especially if that server is two versions ahead. The same is true for FileMaker Go. We have a lot of iOS devices that last for years because Apple makes really high quality hardware. And this hardware still works even though it won't run the latest operating system. So people end up having devices that they love, but they can't really use anymore because they can't use the latest operating system. So keep in mind that as long as you stay within one release on FileMaker Go to your FileMaker server, you're generally going to be okay. Once again, with cloud, that can be a little trickier, but just understand that you need to be on the same version or within one version. Now, the cool thing about FileMaker Go is that you can run both a local custom application or access an application that's being hosted up on FileMaker Server or FileMaker Cloud. Now, this is exactly the same as it is for FileMaker Pro. FileMaker Pro can run a local application or it can access a hosted application. Now, because FileMaker Go is free, you can run a local custom app on it, and it's a great place for customers to try out the FileMaker platform without any cost or obligation. In fact, if you think about it, Claris Corporation only makes money on FileMaker Go when the customer buys FileMaker Server for a specific number of users. And now we've alluded to this in other conversations. However, once again, as a reminder, Claris doesn't sell individual products. You simply tell them the number of users on your team, 5 users, 10, 20, 30, 100 people. They're going to charge you a per seat cost for each user over the course of the year. And each of those people has full access to all of FileMaker's products. So once again, Claris only makes money when you buy a license for your team of users. Now, there's another important concept that people tend to forget about, especially in this more modern day, and that is that FileMaker Go on mobile devices is primarily designed for the consumption of data in the field. That means users will input data, they will edit data, they will take pictures, they will capture signatures, they'll type stuff in, they'll zap a barcode, but they're not doing database development or programming work out on a FileMaker mobile device. Now, I always seem to run into executives at Claris who think that, well, we should allow people to build applications on FileMaker Go. And of course, that sounds really great. However, if you know anything about FileMaker Go or Xcode or Apple's background, people don't write applications on iPhones and iPads. Everyone who builds a serious application for the iOS writes that application using Xcode on a Macintosh, period. And so FileMaker Go, at the time that we shoot this video, doesn't have any development capabilities. I think at some point, Claris might try to add some limited capabilities to this, but at the end of the day, any serious development that you're going to want to do must be done on a Mac or Windows computer using FileMaker Pro. So once again, the iOS devices are great for going out in the field, capturing and reviewing data, reading the data, editing the data, even deleting the data if you want people to do that. But fundamentally, the process of building the custom application occurs on the laptop or desktop. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that FileMaker Go is very similar to FileMaker Pro. In fact, FileMaker Go was originally created from code that was used to build FileMaker Pro. They have a very similar code base, at least originally. The database engine that FileMaker Go and Pro use is called Draco. This is built into both of these products. That's why FileMaker Pro and Go can both run a local custom application, because they have the complete database engine to drive that process. So understand, fundamentally, down at its core, FileMaker Go interacts with FileMaker Server and FileMaker Cloud the same way that FileMaker Pro does. Once again, they have that similar history. So as the Go user logs onto the server, it will download some of the data from the server, and it will cache that data locally on that mobile device and interact with it as appropriate on that mobile device. And any data that it has already downloaded and has saved locally on the device, well, that provides instant access and prevents the need to go back out across the internet to recommunicate to the server to get the information. So caching the data locally is great as long as the data is up to date. And FileMaker Go and FileMaker Pro both make sure that any cached data locally on the device, A, it's invisible to you, but B, it's always up to date. So it's not something you have to worry about. It's just a very important benefit or feature of the product that makes it run much faster. Now, keep in mind, there are a whole host of mobile device-specific features that Claris has built into FileMaker Go. One of the biggest ones is signature capture by using a finger on the touchscreen. Now, you really don't have signature capture on FileMaker Pro. I think you can jury-rig something with a touchscreen and a plugin, etc. But fundamentally, signature capture out of the box is something that's only available on FileMaker Go using iOS devices. Of course, all these iOS devices have integrated cameras, which means that they can read barcodes, they can take pictures, they can put those photos in a database, they can shoot videos, audio files, put those in a database. There's all sorts of cool things you can do. Now, keep in mind, barcode capture with the camera is not a really high-speed process. It's useful for ad hoc barcode scanning, but if you're seriously working in a warehouse, you're going to want to look at integrating a laser barcode reader into the iPad. And typically what happens, you buy a ruggedized case that the iPad or iPhone slips into, and that case has a battery in it, which makes sense. Everyone's seen that. But some of these cases are really cool. They have a laser barcode reader in there. And of course, a laser barcode can read barcodes very rapidly, as opposed to a camera, which has to look at it, focus on it, analyze it. It's much slower. Of course, the iOS devices also have access to GPS coordinates, which can be very handy as well as NFC or near-field communication, which is fairly new technology, something we're starting to see supported with the latest release of FileMaker Go. Now, one of the biggest device-specific capabilities is the fact that there is an integrated touchscreen and no mouse. And of course, that means that you have to design your interface so it looks great on the size of screen that you have. You'll hear me refer to that in this training as screen real estate. How much area do you have on your screen? If you have one of the giant 12.9-inch iPad Pros, those are very cool. And the screen size is like a 13-inch laptop. That provides a lot of screen real estate. You can build an interface very similar to what you would do with FileMaker Pro. except you have to take into account that you're using your finger to touch buttons, to click into fields, and to access the application. So all your target areas have to be large enough that you can hit with your finger. It's a very important concept. I know everyone assumes that these days, but if you build a layout for precision mouse control, very rarely will that layout work well on a mobile device because everything is just too small to click on with your finger. Now, you might click on it sitting at a desk, but if I give you an iPhone with a layout designed for FileMaker Pro, and I have you walk down the sidewalk, there's very little chance of you successfully pressing the buttons without making an error. So that's an important consideration. Screen real estate, finger controls, finger gestures, using your fingers to flip between records, for example, or to flip between slide controls. Now, keep in mind that during this video course, we are talking about periodically WebDirect and how you might want to consider that as you're learning FileMaker Go. Well, WebDirect is very interesting because that was really created by Claris to provide Android access to FileMaker custom applications without requiring Claris to build an Android-specific version of FileMaker Go. Given the politics at Apple, very unlikely you would see Claris build an Android version of an application for Apple's prime mobile competitor, Google's Android. So along the way, we will talk about WebDirect and how that interacts. And there are some interesting similarities between Go and WebDirect. They're more similar than you might think. So once again, keep in mind you're going to need to design mobile layouts. Are those layouts going to be used on an iPhone-sized device or a larger iPad-sized device? Those are important considerations. When FileMaker Go first came out about 10 years ago, this concept was totally new for people. There were people who'd been building software for many years who had never built an application for a mobile device. So keep in mind there are social demographics you need to think about. Who is your target audience? How are they using this application? If they're younger, say they're in their 20s, then how you build the application might be a little bit different than how you'd build it for a guy my age. If you're dealing with a guy who's maybe almost 50 or maybe 60, how are they going to interact with a mobile device? Pretty different than a 20-year-old might. Now, another major consideration to keep in mind is that there is no way of installing plugins with FileMaker Go. However, there are a couple workarounds. The biggest and easiest workaround is to access a FileMaker solution running on Cloud or Server, which is where most of you will access your application. And on that Cloud or Server, you can install a plugin. And so what you can do is actually call a script on FileMaker Go that actually tells that script to run on the server. And when it runs on the server, that script can then have access to a plugin to do what it needs to do. It's a fairly straightforward workaround. It's easy to do. We do it all the time. And so you should probably expect to see that if you're doing any sort of serious FileMaker Go deployments. Now, something else to consider is the whole idea of FiOS, or FileMaker's iOS App SDK. And that's basically the idea of creating a FileMaker Go runtime and then deploying that out to your own enterprise or making it available to the public on Apple's App Store. Now, we talk about this in a previous video. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but you can run plugins if you build your own iOS App SDK. However, there's a lot of work involved in doing that. It's not a trivial process, as we explained in that other video. But technically, that's the other way that you could run a plugin. A plugin can be engineered to work with FileMaker Go if it's created as a runtime through Xcode and compiled and then uploaded to Apple for distribution. Most people say, yeah, I'd really love to build a FileMaker Go application, use the runtime, use Xcode, submit it to Apple. But then they figure out it's going to take several extra weeks just to mechanically deal with Apple, deal with the developer account, get your permissions and provisioning set correctly and all your license certificates, etc. And then they suddenly realize that they added $10,000 to the cost of the project real easily. So for some people, it's a great idea, but they don't want to spend the money on that. So the process of getting around the plugin limitation is one where they leverage the FileMaker Server. So that covers your basic generic brain dump of what a developer needs to know when going from FileMaker Pro to FileMaker Go.